We are live. Good afternoon and welcome to Tea with Mimi. I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me today distinguished flutist Robert Langevin. Robert, it's great to see you and chat with you.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. I'm very, very happy to be there.
Thank you so much. And we've just been doing our little tech check, which evolved into a wonderful conversation about, let's see, we've been complaining about what pieces we wish orchestras would play more. We've been talking about our exercises that we do. And you just shared a revelation about the Ibert Concerto and something that came from French flutist Marcel Moïse. But while we are whetting everyone's appetite for this, and while people are joining the stream here, I am going to officially introduce you. And of course, for so many of us in the music world, in the flute world, Robert Langevin truly needs no introduction. But I will share a little bit from your impressive bio anyway. Canadian flutist Robert Langevin has been principal flute of the New York Philharmonic since 2000. He is former principal flute of the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra and associate principal of the Montreal Symphony. He is on faculty of the Juilliard School and the Manhattan School of Music, formerly taught at Duquesne University and the Université de Montréal. He studied at the Conservatoire de Musique du Québec à Montréal, where he won a Premier Prix, first prize in, I think, flute and chamber music, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then went on to win the Prix d'Europe, where he did graduate study at the Hochschule für Musik in Freiburg with distinguished flutist Aurel Nicolet, and then later studied in Geneva with Maxence Larieux. So I think we'll be coming back a little bit to your studies and with some of these greats in a little while. But Robert has also performed recitals, taught master classes, and performed as a member of the Philharmonic Quintet internationally, and is a noted performer in all areas as well as pedagogue. So once again, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So how are you spending the beginning part of your summer break after the Philharmonic's regular season finished, I think, last week?
Yeah, well, I have a little bit of time off, and I started playing a little bit more tennis and taking some time just to work on things I have to play later in the summer. But it's nice to have the time to do that without having to play in the orchestra.
That is fantastic, and it's so nice to enjoy the weather a bit too, especially if you're doing your outdoor tennis. That sounds fantastic. And as people join, you're welcome to put comments and questions for Robert Langevin in the comments section. And actually, Robert, I meant to mention, you might have a panel on the right of your screen.
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so comments may pop up there as we go. But I was just so delighted when we were talking about what music you would like to share that you sent me some of your solo performances with the New York Philharmonic and also from one of your albums, a recital album, because I mean, I have enjoyed your playing for so many years in countless New York Philharmonic performances and recordings. And so I am delighted to hear these concertos as well, and thought we might start with some music and probably some Mozart. And I might ask you to say something about that. But first, I see Rick Rosen here in New Hope, Pennsylvania says hello. Hello, Rick. Rick is a great choral conductor. Everyone is welcome to also say what they are drinking today. So let us know. I have coffee here in my Klimt mug. And what are you drinking, Robert?
Water.
Very essential. That is good. We like to mix the coffee and chase it with some water as well to not get too much intensity of the coffee. All right. So this is from a live performance, I think, of you doing the Mozart Flute and Harp.
Yes. And you know what's interesting about that concerto?
Yeah.
I've heard from some conductors that they don't think it's one of Mozart's best pieces because it's harmonically simple. And I think that probably part of the reason was that it was written for harp, which at the time didn't have pedals and, could not it was not a chromatic harp like the modern instrument we have today, but it was a commission from an amateur flutist whose daughter was evidently a very good harpist. So the harp part is fairly, I think, intricate, whereas the flute part technically is probably fairly simple. But the genius of Mozart, I mean, he wrote some really beautiful melodies, and it's a piece that is always a delight to play. I mean, I'd be happy to play it anytime, anybody asks me.
I agree. It's so sublime. And yes, you're right about the different kind of harp at the time without pedals. And I have also heard from a few conductors maybe that, the flute concertos are not Mozart's best work, but they're really, as flutists, they're all we've got. I never like hearing that. And they're really they're really quite beautiful.
Sure, yeah, I think so too. I mean, we're not lucky to have the repertoire that the string players have,
Right.
but we still have some good pieces, and I think that's one of them.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to launch into it and switch over to the beginning of the first movement of the Mozart Flute and Harp Concerto. Bravo, Robert. That is so gorgeous. What a sublime performance.
Thank you.
Yes. So beautiful, so brilliant. And I love the ringing sound that you bring to this Mozart.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to play that piece. I mean, as I said before, I could play it anytime.
Absolutely. So that was that with Nancy Allen?
Yes, Nancy Allen, the harpist, and it said Alan Gilbert, but I believe that Lauren Mazel was conducting this performance, but it doesn't matter. But because
Oh,
I don't remember doing it with Alan.
I see. Oh, thanks for that. Yes. And so in general, when you're playing chamber music, do you have specific instruments or repertoire that you enjoy playing with? I know you have this long history with the Philharmonic Wind Quintet, but in addition to that, or yeah.
I mean, what kind of chamber music we have. I mean, we seem to have, um, maybe one piece from a really good composer. And unlike the string players,
Yeah.
I mean, we have obviously the Debussy trio. We have several pieces with cello and piano. I would say any. I mean, when we did the quintet concerts, I would always try to find some pieces outside of the standard quintet repertoire. One of them that we did, which I really enjoyed, is the Quintet Number 3 by Maslanka. I don't know if you know that piece.
Not that piece. I've heard some works by Maslanka. I think he writes a lot for bands.
That's right. Yeah.
But
Well, he's written, for some reason, some years ago, I found a review in a magazine of his quintets, and he's written three of them. But I got a recording and listened to all of them, and I thought the number 3 was especially interesting. So that's one that we've done a fair amount, and and I know we did it in Philadelphia at one of the concerts, maybe the one where you were there. I don't remember, but it's I know people when we've played that piece have mentioned that it sounds much more than 5 instruments together. It sounds like maybe a larger group, just the way it's written, but it's a very interesting piece.
that is very interesting. And I know what you mean about, well, a smaller great repertoire of chamber music. And you mentioned one of my favorites, the Debussy Sonata for flute, viola, and harp, which is great because it's one of the best pieces, I think, in the flute repertoire, but also just in the chamber music repertoire. And it's wonderful when one of our pieces for winds is in that category.
Yes, exactly.
For sure. That is marvelous. Well, we have another sample that's very contrasting with the Mozart that you shared with me of the Christopher Rouse Flute Concerto, also from a tremendously impressive live performance you gave with the New York Philharmonic. And who is conducting that one? I'm about to
I
share.
think, let me think, the conductor was the one who used to be in Detroit, a very well-known American conductor. It's terrible. I mean,
Oh, I see Leonard Slatkin.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect,
Thank
perfect.
you.
No, I
Sorry,
just
Leonard. Didn't mean to.
It is great. No, you play enough concerts, right? That is wonderful. I am going to share a bit of the Alla Marcia movement, extremely virtuosic for flute. You definitely get a sort of slightly off-kilter march feeling in it. Before we listen to it, anything else you want to add about the Rouse?
I think it's a really good piece. I have enjoyed the slow movement. If you've heard the whole piece, the first and fifth movements are similar, and it's a slow. He said he was influenced by Celtic music, and I think it's a really interesting piece. Also, not played that often for some reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a very important American composer. I think he just passed away in the past few years.
Yes.
But I know some of my composer colleagues studied with Christopher Rouse as well, so very influential in that regard. And as I'm getting ready to cue it up, thank you, Rick, for your lovely comment. I think while we were enjoying your Mozart, Robert, he writes,
Oh.
so wonderful to watch two outstanding flautists listening and reacting to flute music. Oh, thank you. Yes, so we look forward to everyone's questions and comments if you have some as we go for Robert Langevin, Principal Flute of the New York Philharmonic. And here we're going to have some Rouse Concerto. Wow. Wow, that is so exciting and fantastic. And I obviously you're playing super incredibly virtuosic in that. And I love the way the percussion colors, but does not overwhelm the solo part.
Yeah, it's a huge orchestra,
Mhm.
uh, but the way it's orchestrated, I think is very effective. And I remember uh, when we had a rehearsal with Leonard Slatkin before the first rehearsal, he had never conducted the piece, but I was amazed because he said, "Oh, I can see where the problems will be," and he could anticipate. I mean, because he has done so much of that kind of music in his life. So he was terrific for. I mean, we had basically, a rehearsal of maybe an hour and a half, and then the dress rehearsal, and that was it. But when you have a conductor who's really experienced, it's amazing what can be done.
Yes, so impressive, of course, having great musicians, but just isn't it remarkable how quickly things are put together
Oh yes, yes.
today?
Well, they have to be because it's so expensive that we
Yeah.
don't have the luxury of having. Even in Europe, orchestras there usually have more rehearsals. They'll have you know five or six rehearsals routinely for a program. We do programs with four rehearsals, sometimes three, so we have to work very efficiently.
And it kind of speaks to what we were talking about before we went live when we were chatting just about how a lot of 20th century music is not performed by today's orchestras as much. And when, for example, I spoke to the late American composer Richard Warnick, who was recollecting about the sort of post World War II period when a lot of major large scale symphonic works were premiered by American composers such as Williams, Schumann, Rogers Sessions, and others, there was a lot more rehearsal time at that
Oh
point
yes,
about
yeah,
these large works. So,
yeah. It might be part of the reason why some of those pieces are not done much because if there's a piece that requires a fair amount of rehearsal, they have to make sure that the rest of the program is something that we can do very quickly,
well,
because we don't have that luxury. And we see that sometimes when we have guest conductors coming from Europe who are used to more rehearsal. excuse, excuse me. Um, they're they're not used to be able to put a program in four rehearsals. It's
yeah, there's such a calculus of non-musical things that go into
right.
the decision
Yeah,
making, unfortunately,
it is. Yeah, it
but
is.
but the result, of course, in the Rouse we just heard, and everything is fantastic. What's it like to perform as a soloist with your orchestra, with your colleagues of many years?
Oh, it's not that different from playing with any other orchestra. I mean, I know that these players are very experienced, and
Yeah.
they're always prepared. I mean, we come to the first rehearsal and we read through a piece, and it could be it could be a first performance. Sometimes it's we have a lot of new musicians now, and of course younger musicians, and they're I'm sorry,
Oh no.
they're very you know very conscientious and really, and I've noticed that we've had a number of just in the wind section in the last 6 7 years, a number of young musicians, and they come in, and I'm amazed because they're in their early 20s. Some of them, for many of them, it's their first job, and they play like they have experience, like they've been there for 20 years. It's amazing. The level of players nowadays is
Mhm.
really, really very high.
That is amazing. Absolutely. Well, when I think about the New York Philharmonic, I also think about the glorious recordings that my teacher Julius Baker made, often under Leonard Bernstein, and that whole incredible tradition. And I guess I haven't had a chance to ask you yet, Robert. Did you know Mr. Baker? Or-
Yes, I did. When I was a student at the Conservatory in Montreal, he came at least once. And I remember it was at the same time as Ron Powell was in town playing a recital. And of course, they knew each other very well. And they both came to the class. And at some point, they even played a duet together. And yes, I did meet him. And I also met him when I moved to Pittsburgh, because at the time he was teaching at Carnegie Mellon University.
Yes.
And one of my colleagues in the orchestra here, who was the second flute player, Marty Lerner, knew him very well from many years, before. He was maybe a little bit younger, but maybe just 5 years younger or so. And I remember we had lunch with him at some point, after rehearsal. And oh yes, I certainly, and I mean, he was a legend, as you know. I mean, everybody knew his playing. And I heard recently that apparently even after he left the orchestra, that he would practice an hour to an hour and a half every day.
Yes, this actually does not surprise me. I mean, when I first met Julius Baker, he brought me to study with him at Curtis when I was 12, and he was already close to 80, I think, and he sounded with the famous Baker sound so gorgeous, would play in every lesson, would play duets with me. I mean, just as beautifully as we could ever hope to play, but even at that age. So yes, no, he made a point of always practicing his exercises, actually the same exercises he had us play. But it's just so lovely when I speak to someone about their recollections of Julius Baker, because he was like a bonus grandfather for me.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, this is a perfect segue, because speaking of exercises, of course, we are so nerdy about our exercises as flutists. We have to be. This is what we do. But you have just published the Langevin Method, a book of your exercises, and I'd love for you to tell our listeners about it a little bit.
Yes, I'll just show you it just came out maybe 2 months ago, and it's published by Theodore Presser. And it came about, it was really not my idea. Is one of my students, former students, Amanda Blakey, who plays in Detroit now, during the pandemic, had the idea of putting all those exercises. I used to give people photocopies of sheets of exercises that I would write, and some of them were frustrated that they weren't written all completely. I would write a little bit, and I'd say, just transpose them, and some of them wanted them all written out. So it's taken a number of years to put together, but it's finally come out.
Congratulations. I can't wait to see it. And it's so interesting, I think, for flutists, like any musician, but maybe any athlete, right? We have to do certain things to stay in shape. And there are variations on that. Do you have long tones in yours, or is yours
Yes.
about the
Yeah, it has long tones. And as a matter of fact, Amanda has expanded the long tones because she teaches some younger players. So she made at first a simpler version, and then mine shows up a little bit later, where I do them based on the Moïse ones, except that I remember when I started playing in orchestra, one thing I found very difficult. It was particularly in Beethoven symphonies, where you play something and you're going, in a forte dynamic, and then you have a subito piano. And that's something that I had never worked on as a student. So I started doing my long tones forte in piano, the same notes, forte in piano, without breathing, just so that I could work on the subito part of it, which is not easy to do if it's something you've never worked on.
Absolutely, that is great, because there are some Moïse. For those of you who are not flutists listening, Marcel Moïse was one of the great classic French flutists who also published a lot of exercise books, and his one about tone de la sonorité, or of the sound, is one of the kind of Bibles that flutists return to about tone. But some of his books do have the crescendo decrescendo exercises, but most long tones we don't encounter that. And so we might add them in ourselves, but that's really nice that you put that, especially since, isn't it such an interesting topic, the dynamics in Beethoven, and not just the subitos, but the forte pianos. So, right, what is a forte piano in Beethoven? Is it actually two dynamics happening, but really close in time? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and I remember years ago playing the Beethoven Serenade with
Mhm.
violin and viola,
Yes.
and the string players were telling me that for them also, it's very difficult to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was interesting that it was not just a problem that we had, but that even string players, and you encounter that a lot in Beethoven for some reason.
Yes, it is. It is, right? And I just think if you look at it in terms of performance practice, it would be interesting to know what it meant to them at that time. In some of the similar way we think of, like in Mozart's time, the Mannheim
Hmm.
crescendo was very well known from the orchestra there, and something that they did and were known for. And so I wonder if there's something about how people were playing forte pianos that inspired Beethoven.
Yeah.
He had in
Well,
his
along that line, you
Mhm.
have the same thing in Schubert, like, in the Schubert variations,
Yeah.
in the introduction, when you have accents in that case meant more for a string player, a left hand accent, which means more with the vibrato rather than the kind of sforzando accent that we're used to in more modern music. So things meant a different thing back then. Same thing, like the dots in the theme. It just meant that the composer wanted to make sure that the performer would not slur the notes, because back then, you know, uh, Mozart or other composers did not write articulations. They left it out to the performer. But
Mhm.
if they wanted to make sure that something would not be slurred, they would put dots. But for us, dots mean really short. But back then, it had a very different meaning.
Yes, and it absolutely won't work because if it's in the theme and that's vocal,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
want to be short. Yeah, I know. I love these questions, and I mean they're so fascinating, and they also help us play the way hopefully the composer intended. But yeah,
Right.
I always think about, like, if you find a slur in Bach or Mozart from the manuscript, when there is a holograph manuscript, it means they specifically wanted that rather than
Mhm.
left up to the performer or
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
the time. That's fascinating. Well, actually, we have some comments. Leo 5208 said, "Hi, Mimi and Robert. I'm enjoying this from home in Maryland. That is great." And Victor Coco, who comes to our Dolce Suono Ensemble concerts, is also on now. Hello, Victor. Everyone who is listening now is welcome to put a comment where you are, where you're listening from, what you might be drinking, and of course, any uh, questions, if you like, for our superstar flutist, Robert Langevin, while we're at it. But just so you know, if you're joining late, this is going to be available after on YouTube, so people can hear later this discussion with some music. Well, we talked a little bit about your new book, which is, I can't wait to see. Do you have advice for young and aspiring flutists?
I would say probably the best advice is listen to your teacher. Your teacher as experience as and of course, every teacher wants the best possible thing for each of the students. So, do exactly what your teacher tells you to do, and I think you'll be in good shape.
That sounds fantastic. And actually, that's a wonderful segue because you suggested that we listen to a sample from one of your teachers, from Maxence Larieux, playing Vivaldi. And I'd love to put some on. Do you think we should hear some first and then tell me what you're thinking about it? Or would you like to introduce?
Sure. No, no, go ahead, play it. See what people think.
We'll do that. Oh, and some more greetings. Hello, Steve Fisher. We were just talking about something where I always consult him. He's a phenomenal musicologist, very well known. So greetings from Fredericksburg, Virginia to Steve. Definitely someone who has clarified mysteries for me about C.P. Bach and other composers. And Becky Stinnett, hello from Fresno, California. Hello, and hello, Chris Mead. Hi, everybody. We're going to hear
Yeah.
some Vivaldi Sonata by the French flutist Maxence Larieux in a moment. Wow, what a beautiful Vivaldi G minor sonata with Maxence Larieux and Georges Kiss on harpsichord. Robert, please share what you'd like about this player and your studies with him.
Well, this particular recording was made. I mean, he's still alive. He's 91 years old now. He still plays, but this was made when he was 70 years old, and the sound is exactly what I remember from when I was studying with him. I mean, incredible. Probably one of the most natural players. I would usually have my lesson in early afternoon, and I would stay the rest of the afternoon to listen to other people's lessons, mostly to hear him demonstrate. I mean, when he would play, you hear somebody like that who's about 5 feet away from you, and that sound is just, is, and it's interesting about sound, because sound is such an abstract thing that I think we need to, and the students in general need to listen to a lot of players. And, I mean, we end up always having our own sound because, our own physical attributes are different from anybody else's. So I don't think it's possible to sound exactly like somebody else, but I think you can be inspired by hearing some really great playing, a great sound. It just makes you want to. I remember something, once in a while after a lesson, a student would say, "Well, now I'm going to go practice." So I think part of the job of a teacher is to inspire students to practice and work.
Absolutely. No, I felt that very much studying with my teachers, Julius Baker and Jeffrey Kaner. And in terms of falling in love with the flute sound, that happened to me as a very small child, loving all different flute recordings. One day, my mother brought home my first Julius Baker recording, and I apparently put away other flutists and said, I want to sound like him. That's why it was such a dream come true to study with him. And of course, Julius Baker is known as being a major American flutist and teacher. And coming out, though, of the French tradition, almost all of us have, let's say, French ancestry as flutists, in that Baker studied with William Kincaid, who studied with Georges Barrère, or then Boston Flute School through Georges Laurent. And so question for you, I mean, I think sometimes you would hear people say, do you sound French or American? But I think that's a bit false, because like you're saying, we all sound like ourselves. But in terms of the French school and all the greatness it has to offer, how would you describe that, or what values were imparted to you by those teachers that you had from that tradition?
Well, Maxence Larieux's first teacher was Joseph Rampal, who was Jean-Pierre Rampal's father.
Oh.
Who taught in Marseille. All the great French flutists of that time all came from Marseille, because they all studied with Rampal's father. And of course, Rampal studied with his father as well, and Alain Marion, and Jean-Louis Baumadier, and many players of that time. And they said that he was just a terrific player, and they would also play duets with him. In lessons. And that's how I think in the old days that was done more and you have to remember that that's before really the time of recordings. Maybe there was radio, but I remember Aurel Nicolet telling me that his teacher, who was André Jaunet, who was principal flute of the Tonhalle Orchestra in Zurich, it was a Frenchman. He went to Switzerland to play. He's the only flutist he ever heard when he was a student. Because nowadays it's so different. With the with YouTube, and you can hear anybody in the world. But back then, the styles of playing were different, because people would play like their teachers, because that's the only person they would hear. And of course, in different countries, there were different styles of playing. But I think that, from a long time ago, from the time of Taffanel and the time of Gaubert, the French school was known, even in the 19th century, as being really one of the top schools of playing in the world. And people, of course, travel and went to study there. And now, nowadays you have great players in any country, but it probably, a lot of it comes from that time, that school.
Yes, and what you're saying, Tefan and Gobert, major pedagogues, but also composers, and really advanced the repertoire being written, inspiring people like Fauré and Debussy and Ravel to write for them in the way they were playing.
Exactly. That when Paul Taffanel took over the class at the conservatory in Paris in 1895, he started the tradition of commissioning pieces to composers for the end of the year exam. And the first one to write a piece was Gabriel Fauré in 1898, where he wrote a fantasy. And then, you had people like Enesco and Gaubert and Taffanel and others, that wrote after that. But a lot of our repertoire comes from that.
Yes, the Morceau de Concours is so major. And you're so right. Before the Fauré Fantasy, they were reusing pieces more.
Yeah, and it was, the 19th century composers like Toulouse, who were, more, it was a very different, aesthetic, if you want. With Fauré was probably the first of the fairly well-known composers to write, for the flute. So the other ones, Toulouse and Demerseman and these people were, it was about virtuosity and speed. But with Fauré came, a more, how should I say, a great music making, rather than flute playing.
Yeah, and I think also ushering this age of the emphasis on timbre, like timbre, tone color for instruments. We associate so much with Debussy, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but even Fauré is very much about that. Let's say French Romantic composers um,
Yes.
starting that, and I guess that's also connected to this question about the French style of flute playing. As you were talking about Rampal's father being such an influential teacher, I remember a line from Rampal's memoirs where he talks about how the sound of his father was so influential, and I think he described
Yeah.
it as being limpid,
Yeah.
maybe comme limpide, maybe, or clear.
Yeah.
You grew up speaking French. I grew up speaking Spanish. So your French is way better than mine. But what do you think? I mean, when we say a clear sound, I think it means something very special in this context of flute, but also French flute. What does it mean to you, this idea of the limpid or clear sound for the
Well,
tradition?
I think we heard some of it in the Vivaldi recording. I
Yeah.
think I always think of something transparent. Like there's no, how can I say, there's no, nothing in between the production of the sound and the sound itself.
Yeah.
It's like somebody speaking. It's a very natural. There's never anything forced. The vibrato is very natural. Everything is and with colors. And see, I think that's why, starting with Debussy, probably with the Afternoon of a Faun, that the because he probably knew that the instrument could do all these colors. And of course, for these composers, colors were everything. I mean, if you listen to the opening phrase of Afternoon of a Faun by itself, it's a chromatic scale going on a tritone. I mean, there's nothing really special about it. But what makes it special is the sound and the color that the person can put to it, and it creates the mood of the whole piece. And like with the Impressionist painters, when you look at Impressionist painting, the subject is really not that important, but it's the overall feeling, overall mood you get when you look at the piece, at the painting. And I think it's the same thing with the music of that time.
What you said is so perfect, because actually I was going to share some of your Debussy Prélude à l'après-midi d'un faune from your album of the Belle Époque. So yes, let's hear. This is from this arrangement with piano that we know and love, not the orchestra, but let's actually, everyone will hear the opening that you just described. How about that? And then we have some good questions we're going to come back to in a moment. Almost impossible to stop at any point. That gorgeous music, but really, really stunning performance. Thank you, Robert. So
Oh, thank you. It's incredible music. I mean, we were talking earlier about our repertoire, but we do have some pieces like that that are really amazing. And even this arrangement by Samazeya, I think, is very well done. And apparently, it was based on a version for two pianos that Debussy had written, but I think is lost now. But what's amazing is that just the flute and the piano themselves uh, can really portray the whole piece. Of course, for the flute, it's challenging because you play not only the flute solos, but the oboe and clarinet and sometimes the violin solo. But it's so well written and it's such great music.
it is. Yes, no, I performed this same arrangement a lot and love it. And yeah, the piano writing does work so beautifully. Debussy
Yeah.
himself was a great pianist and wrote great music. And I think Samazoy was a contemporary of his. So
Yes. Uh-huh.
luckily it works very, very well. But just, I think that gave everyone a chance to just hear everything we were talking about, sound and color.
Yeah.
Coming different French traditions. Absolutely. We have some really nice questions here. First, actually, a comment from Tracy Norcon, who is a flutist. Hello from Connecticut. I am loving this conversation and finding it so interesting. Thank you both. Well, thank
It's a pleasure.
you. Yes, and I don't know the answer to this question. Leo has asked, is this about the sample by Maxence Aria? Is this really by Vivaldi or is it by Nicolas Chadeville?
Well, I know that the G minor is supposed to be by Chedeville, but I don't know about the other ones. I must admit that I didn't know the other sonatas until Maxence Larieux gave me this recording, but I think that that's something for musicologists to clarify. But whatever or whoever it is by, I think it's really beautiful music.
It is very much, and I mean, I'm glad that you raised that question because at some point I remember learning that some of the pieces we thought were Vivaldi were by Chedeville, but I just don't know exactly which ones.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah. And this is a great question and very timely from Victor. Will you celebrate America's 250th 4th of July with music coming soon?
Well, the thing that surprises me is that the orchestra is not doing anything for the 4th of July, which is surprising, especially this year being the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution. So, no, I'm not.
Yeah, we've been with Dolce Suono Ensemble. My group has celebrated throughout the year. We do a lot of American music, but we did have a specific 250th concert in February where we premiered a work by Jacob Banks that was celebrating American songs and dances, and it was for flute, piano, and percussion, which was really a lot of fun and just kind of flagged some American music throughout. But on July 4th, I don't know, maybe we'll release something virtually as an ensemble.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
What about, and before we wrap up, do you have other fun summer plans, perhaps with family or any trips outside the Philharmonic?
Well, I'm teaching for 1 week at Orford in the middle of July, and I'm doing a recital. And then right after that, the orchestra always does a residency at the Vail Colorado Festival for about 10 days. So until the end of July, we're there. And after that, August is usually vacation. So no, that's when I put the flute away for a month and take a break.
Okay, that sounds great. But luckily, you have the exercises in your own book to use when you come back. No, that sounds wonderful. Well, Robert, I am so grateful for you for taking the time to join me this afternoon. It's been fascinating and joyful for me just to speak with you and get to know you a little bit more and learn from your.
It's been a pleasure, really. Time has flown by.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to see and hear you again in person. And you just reminded me of when we first met. I was about 13 performing at a Pittsburgh Symphony concert, a benefit concert for World Wildlife Foundation, actually.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And then we've met since, but this is great. I want everyone to know, if you're joining us later, this link will be on YouTube. It will be on Facebook for a while, so please share with your friends and friend flutists. And thanks everybody for tuning in with us. I'll be announcing some more Tea with Mimi shows and different Dolce Suono Ensemble and solo concerts as we go. And you all know where to find Robert Langevin and his artistry, especially in his home base at the New York Philharmonic.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye. A bientôt.